my pleasure and privilege to be invited to speak to you today. Sorry about the hardware. I have this new thing. It's a Microsoft Surface. Didn't seem to surface today, so just a word to the wise if you're thinking about buying one. My name's Lee Copeland. I'm with Software Quality Engineering. As introduced, one of the things that I do at SQE is produce conferences. I'm the program chair for the Star East and Star West Testing Conference, which are the biggest ones in the world. And I think we have a great conference and a great product.
Thank you.
And as much as I like big conferences, I love regional conferences like this also. It's a place where you can come and meet each other and share ideas. I think it's marvelous, and I'm appreciative of being invited here. I've chosen this topic today, Creating a Better Testing Future. And subtitled, The World is Changing and Testing Must Change with It. And I've broken my talk up into three basic sections. I probably don't have to convince you that our world is changing rapidly, but I'm going to anyway. I'm going to talk about the curse of past successes and what success in the past can do for us and do to us in the future. And I'm going to talk about the do's and don'ts of future success. And in the do's and don'ts, I'm going to try and be offensive. I'm going to try and step on some toes and may pick on one of your favorite things. So let's talk about how technology is changing. That introduction about how I've been in the business for 30 years, I actually quit updating that about 10 years ago. It's not going to change the number anymore. And when I was a young student at the university, this is what computing looked like. There was a big machine in a big room full of lots of air conditioning, and there were only a few people who were the priesthood of the computer who could approach it, who could touch it, who could give it commands. The rest of us stayed outside looking through a glass window. The world now, of course, is very different. I have a tablet that doesn't work. I have a phone that does. And we have all of these different kinds of devices now that are so readily available. So that part of the world has changed. There's another part of our world which has changed, and that's customers. Customers are changing. They now expect more. And I think if there's anyone who epitomizes that idea, that change, it would be Steve Jobs, who through his genius gave us some amazing devices that are influencing all of us. I have a 4-year-old granddaughter who lives with me, who wakes up in the morning and grabs her iPad and plays little fun games and watches movies and things. I saw a great picture of a 3-year-old the other day in a magazine. The 3-year-old is looking at a magazine. You remember magazines, those printed paper things? And she's trying to swipe the pages of the paper to make the images bigger. People expect more. Customers expect more. Our customers are less tolerant of low quality. It's become easier and easier simply to go somewhere else, to use a different tool or a different vendor or a different this or a different that. People just aren't putting up with the problems that they used to. And they are less loyal, because of that, they are less loyal to the brands that they have become accustomed to. So technology is changing, and customers are changing, and the business is changing. I just did a search on Amazon the other day of most popular business books. And look at the titles. Now, do more faster, smarter, faster, cheaper, faster. Focusing on startups, not on existing companies. starting with the end in mind. Technology is changing, customers are changing, business is changing. And I would suggest that we have to change with it. In organizations, the communication is changing. In the past, organizations basically controlled their communication. They controlled the content and they controlled the channels. Okay. They had PR companies, PR departments, public relations companies, who crafted the message, who chose the channels, who always put the best face possible on the news. Today, with the rise of social media, things like Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, organizations do not control communications about them anymore. The public does. The public controls the content, the public controls the channel, and about all organizations can do these days is simply monitor and try and repair. This moves also over into testing. In the old days, where old days is like 3 and 4 and 5 years ago, the organizational structure of your organization controlled the communication. It controlled the content, and it controlled the channels. There were only certain people in your organization you could talk to. There were certain ways you could communicate with them. Sometimes those were effective, and sometimes those were not. I remember doing some consulting for an organization. I can't mention them by name, but it's a credit card company that starts with the letter V. And they had some very strict rules about testers and developers communicating. Basically, they were not allowed to. If you were a tester, you had to talk to your test lead, who talked to the test manager, who talked to the test director, who talked then to the development director, and finally your message may or may not have gotten down to the individual developers. This is not the way it is anymore. Today communication has changed again because of social media. I'm an old guy, and I'm not really into all this Twitter stuff. But I watched a tester who had a problem post that on Twitter, and within 10 minutes had people literally all over the world giving her good advice and helping her solve the problem. Communication is changing inside and outside. We need to be, as testers, ready for that. What else is changing? Well, the development process. I'm sure you're familiar with this. In the good old days, we had classic waterfall. Do all the requirements, then do the analysis, then do all the design, then all the coding, and then all the testing and finally install. We don't do that much anymore. How many of you are practicing Agile in one of its varieties? Raise your hands real high, would you please? All right, at least half. We have the Scrum cycle that dictates very rapid delivery. We have extreme programming practices, which give us a foundation of the technical part of that extremely fast delivery. The delivery process is changing, and again, as testers, we must change with it. No longer can we wait until some part of the system or all of the system is thrown over the wall. We have to be close to our developers. We have to be ready to test. The development process is changing in other ways, the languages that we use. In the good old days, if I knew a little assembler, a little COBOL, a little CICS, then I could rule the world. These days, the list goes on and on. C++, Java, HTML and its varieties, JavaScript, XML, SQL. The development process is changing. And again, as testers, we must be ready for that. We must change with it. We've got to match development. We have to be where our developers are. If they're delivering on a 2-week basis, we need to be ready to test on a 2-week basis. If they're developing on a daily basis, we need to be able to test on a daily basis. We can't do the over-the-wall when we want to kind of process anymore. Now, I'd like to kind of take you back few years, 30 years or so. Boris Weiser's first book on software testing techniques came out in 1983. The IEEE 829 testing standard, which many of you know about, it's that standard that defines the way we document testing, test plans, test cases, test results, and so on. It was published first in 1983. Kem Kainer's book, Testing Computer Software, which as far as I know is still the #1 best-selling book ever written on testing computer software, came out in 1987. So what else was happening in these years? Well, in 1983, there were newspaper and magazine articles about the death of the mainframe. It's going to go away. Those of you who work on mainframes, you better find something else to do. It was the Apple Lisa. It's when it came out. And one of my favorites, I don't know if you recognize this screenshot, it's Windows 1.0, 1983. Now, isn't it interesting that the technology has changed so much, yet we still read Weiser's book, and we still follow the 829 standard, and we still read Kainer's book, although our world has changed dramatically. Again, I think today's testing needs to match today's technology. Let me talk for just a moment about what I call the curse of past successes. Processes that made us successful in the past may in fact prevent us from being successful in the future. Now, I know we don't like that idea. We'd like to believe that those things that helped us be successful in the past will continue on. And we hope so. We've gotten good at them. We're effective with them. We're successful with them. They've made us successful. They've made our organizations successful. And yet sometimes those things that made us successful in the past are roadblocks. When I was a young child, I used to look out of the window and see the REA trucks driving by. REA trucks were beautiful, a beautiful dark green color with gold trim. REA stands for the Railway Express Agency. Their job was to get stuff off of railroad cars and deliver it to people, to individuals and to organizations. Okay? They were the FedEx or the DHL or the UPS of their day. And where are those green trucks today? They're gone. The people at the REA, when airplanes started to carry freight, defined their mission, continued to define their mission. In that way, it had always been successful. Our job is to take things off of railway cars and deliver them. And they're gone today. And many other organizations are gone. I don't know, some years ago there was a book by Tom Peters called In Search of Excellence. How many are familiar with that book? I've seen that book. Okay, a few. Peters and his companion, his associates, studied many, many companies. And they put, 20-some in this book. Examples of excellent companies. The amazing thing is that 80% of those companies are gone today. Again, they were impacted by the curse of past successes. They could not see that the world was changing, and they could not change with it, and the world left them behind. And I don't want that to happen to testing. Let me just give you a few examples here. Now, these are all U.S. examples. I don't know how things are here. But camera film is the thing of the past. Kodak recently, the manufacturers of Kodachrome, Paul Simonson, Kodachrome. It's gone. It's gone. You can buy it in antique stores. Polaroid film, that kind of film that instantly developed out of your camera. It's gone. You buy it in antique stores. Things that I would have told you, 10 years ago, will be here forever, are gone. Video rental stores. Thing of the past in the United States. The two big ones, Blockbuster and Hollywood, are gone. Why are they gone? Netflix, internet. We have these little things called Redbox, which look like Coke machines or Pepsi machines, where you can, and they're everywhere. They're at McDonald's, where you can go and rent videos. The big brick and mortar video stores are gone. Newspapers are gone. 20-some of the very large newspapers in the United States have simply quit printing. They've folded up and gone away. And again, 10 years ago, I would have told you that could never happen. But I don't see very far in the future. I can tell you a little story about that. When I was in graduate school, I was working on a project. It's called the ARPANET. We're trying to hook some computers together, get them to talk to each other. And I was at the University of Utah. We were the third computer on this thing called the ARPANET. This was like November, December 1969. We got it to talk to a couple of other computers, send messages back and forth. Whatever happened to that ARPANET idea, do you know? It became something called the Internet. Okay? You're looking at an Internet pioneer right here. I helped put computer number 3 onto the network that became the Internet. And I had no clue where that was going to go. I was just a young grad student trying to get a message, a bunch of bits to go down a wire and come back again. In astronomy, there's a term called event horizon. The event horizon is how far out you can see. And personally, my event horizon has unfortunately always been very close. Okay. I see the past very well, but I don't see the future too well. But so many newspapers are gone. Brick and mortar stores of all kinds. Borders, which was a huge bookstore in the United States, is gone. Mervyn's, which was an upscale clothing store, is gone. Brick and mortar stores are closing right and left. We have huge malls where almost every store is now gone. And they're gone because they believed that the future was going to continue, that the things that made them successful in the past were going to continue. Getting bills in the mail. The United States Post Office is near bankruptcy. It always, kind of changes the rules just ahead of time so it doesn't have to declare bankruptcy. But they had decided that their future was based on sending lots of bills to people in the mail. And now most bills come electronically. And the post office has nothing to deliver. And yet they have hundreds and thousands of post offices, tens of thousands of employees, trucks, airplanes. They were successful in the past, but they're not going to be successful in the future. All right. I hope I've convinced you that our past successes are not a guarantee, not a predictor of success in the future. So with my limited ability now, I want to give you some do's and don'ts for future success. And I've organized them into 6 areas. I want to talk a little bit about organization, test process, technology, planning, automation, and focus. These are the things that I'd like to talk with you about. So let's start with organization. This is where I hope I step on some toes. Advice number 1, don't continue to maintain teams of developers and testers who throw products over the wall. This seemed like a good idea at the time. If we separate developers and testers, we do that because they have different needs, they have different skills, require different resources, they work at different times in the project. And above all, one of the arguments was, by having them as separate, we will foster independence. What we did, in fact, was create all kinds of communications problems, hands-off difficulties, and this us versus them mentality. Well, you know who we should blame? It's the developers. And you know who they blame? The testers. And we've done this by putting up this wall. It's a wall of confusion. Don't do that. I went to the doctor the other day. You know, I'm getting old, and I'm getting a little achy. And I said, Doc, it hurts when I do this. Now notice, this arm goes up perfectly, but this one kind of stops right here. It hurts when I do this. The doc looked at me and smiled and said, well, don't do that. Not a very helpful doc. When you separate developers and testers, you know, it'll hurt. Don't do that. Okay. Don't set up testing centers of excellence. I know that's really popular. As program chair for the Star East and Star West testing conferences, I get at least a dozen proposals from people who want to speak about the wonderfulness of testing centers of excellence. You know, we organize all of our testers together and we train them, and they have common language and common understanding and common tools and techniques, and we have all these good reasons for doing that. What it really does is it separates the testers from the projects that they're responsible for, and it separates the testers from the developers. My friend David Hussman said this. He said, testing centers of excellence are where the disengaged gather to not produce. Every time I get a proposal for establishing a testing center of excellence, there's always a section in it on what to watch out for, what can go wrong. Don't do that. What should you do? Integrate your developers and testers on the same team. Put them together. Let them be friends. Yes, they have different roles and responsibilities, but let them work together. These are professionals. They're not going to be overly influenced or biased. They're not going to overlook defects. Come on. Put them on the same team. Have them work together. So that's what I have to say about organization. Testing process. Don't cling to a waterfall style when your organization is moving towards agile. There's a popular phrase I hear referred to Scrum. It's called Scrum or Fall. You know, the developers are doing Scrum. They're doing that rapid iterative development and deliver fast and often. And we as testers are waiting for big batches. You know, every 6 months we will awake from our slumber and look and see what's come over the wall and start testing. Don't do that. Don't cling to this waterfall style. Another idea, don't try and test everything. Everything is a huge number. For any system that's of any interest, there will be millions of execution paths, and there will be millions of data combinations. And if you multiply those together, you get gazillions, and you're just not going to be able to do it in your lifetime. Your customers, your organization, your final end users need you to find the important defects as quickly as possible. And a mentality that starts out with, well, let's test everything, just isn't going to do it. It's not going to do it. Michael Bolton has introduced us to a really good idea, and it's don't confuse checking with testing. Let me tell you what Michael has to say with that. When we believe something is true, and we're simply verifying that it's true, we call that checking. It's a process of confirmation, of verification, validation. It's a highly automatable process. When you're doing test automation, you are not doing testing, you are doing checking. You're verifying that the system works in a way that you expect it to. On the other hand, testing is something that we do when we're trying to discover new information. Testing is a process of exploring and discovery, of learning, of investigation. It's not automatable. It's using our brain in real time. It's a battle, us against the software, and it's really fun. And I recommend it highly. I hope you would do more testing. Another thing I'd like to suggest for the future is you need to adopt a customer-focused approach to testing. And as part of that, you need to first identify who your real customer is and what do they really want. I am pretty sure that they do not want test cases. I'm pretty sure they do not want test reports. I'm pretty sure they don't want test plans. They may not even want test strategies. What do they want? They want software that has very few defects. Focus on that first. Now, I'm not saying that test cases and test plans and test results are not a good idea, but they're things that we use internally to guide and focus and keep track of our testing. And just because we have those things doesn't mean that our clients and customers are interested in it. All right? So be customer focused. Ask yourself this question: what value does my testing add? Most of us focus on what processes does testing execute. Imagine for just a moment that you're stuck in the elevator, just you and the president of your company. And you see his badge, and he sees yours, and he turns to you and says, "What do you do for the company?" You've got 30 to 60 seconds to answer. It's the classic elevator speech. What do you say? Do you talk about how you create test cases? How you compute test coverage? How you put together test plans? How you got this new thing called code coverage, which is really cool. What should you talk about? You should talk about the value that you and your organization add to the overall. That's what that company president wants to hear. Not your new test process improvement ideas. Let's talk about technology. Let's start with the don'ts. Again, don't use Stone Age techniques, tools, and technologies. Now, I love this picture. I'm not sure what this tool does, but I'm sure we have it in our testing lab somewhere. Do embrace new technologies, even sometimes when they don't work as they were expected. Embrace new technologies. Learn all you can about those. Consider open source tools. You get The Simpsons here in Malaysia? You know, familiar with, yes? Know The Simpsons? Well, here's Bart saying, open source is good for me. I will fully embrace it. Open source is good for me. Think about open source testing tools. Please understand, I'm not opposed to the commercial vendors and their tools. They have some great stuff. But you might want to consider open source also. There's marvelous things being done in that community. In terms of test planning, don't adopt rigid, overly detailed plans. I just searched on Google on test plans and found that image. I don't know what it's for, but it's clearly too complicated, and it's clearly never going to be executed in that way. Helmuth von Moltke, who was a Russian army officer, said this. He said, "No battle plan survives contact with the enemy." Another way to say that is no test plan survives contact with the system under test. The system under test will always surprise you in ways that you didn't anticipate. Your plan will not be complete. It will not be correct. It will not be comprehensive. I'm not opposed to test plans, but I am opposed to things that will never be executed. You've seen the Gantt charts and the PERT charts. They go on for pages. Sometimes they're spread over multiple walls. The first 2 or 3 things on the chart, do you believe those? Do you believe the schedule? I usually do. What about the things at the bottom? Do you believe those? Of course not. They're there to make somebody feel good. Another thing, don't restrict your planning just to explicit requirements. The explicit requirements will always be wrong. They will always be incorrect. They will always be incomplete. There's never enough time to put all the details in. So don't restrict your testing just to explicit requirements. Explore, learn, challenge. If you pull up some kind of screen that it's got the classic file edit across the top, and you click on file and get a drop down and you click on printer or print, and a box pops up that has nothing to do with printing. Do you need a requirements document to tell you that's probably a defect? No. You know a lot outside the explicit requirements. Tap into that and use them. So don't do this. Do create test plans. I'm not anti-test plans, but they need to be shorter. First of all, they need to tell a story about what you're testing and why and how. They need to present essential data. Okay? They need to inspire and communicate. And they need to describe a reasoned plan of action. But beyond that, use the brains of your testers. They have them, and they're very good. All right, a little bit now about automation. Some don'ts about automation. Don't rely on capture reports. This is one of my favorite test tool salesmen here. And remember the old days? It's just like a VCR. Okay, you put in the tape and you push record, and you go tap, tap, tap at your computer screen, and all those keystrokes are recorded, and then you go over to the capture playback tool, and you press stop, and you press rewind, and then you press play. And it will regurgitate, it will spew forth all of those keystrokes. And now you're automated. How many of you have tried that? Raise your hands up. How many know it doesn't work? Lots of hands. Oh, even more hands. Okay? Now you can make it work in a sense with lots of extra effort on your part. But the idea that it's just like a VCR, it's wrong. It doesn't work. Don't do that. Another thing, don't try to automate every test. There are some tests that it is simply more difficult to automate than it is to do manually. You don't want to throw your money away. You don't want to pour it down the drain. Let me give you an example of that. Done some consulting for a company called IGT, and I doubt that you've heard of IGT. But they are the world's #1 maker of slot machines. And they have a huge test lab. It's about the size of this room, with full of these slot machines. And one thing that they do is invite all their employees to come in and play the machines. And no money goes in and no real money comes out. But I talked to them one day about this idea of automating everything. They automate pieces of the slot machine very effectively. All the stuff inside that chooses a random number and decides what you've won and decides that you've lost. All that's automated and easily done, effectively done. But all the stuff you see on the screen, the bells, the noise, what they call the trash and flash, trying to automate that would be very difficult. They'd have to build cameras that they put in front of these slot machines that would have to do all kinds of incredible pattern detection. and they don't even try. They just get what they call wet eyeballs, that is, real people, to come and watch. And about every 2 meters along the wall, there's a red phone. And if you see something that appears to be a defect, you simply pick up the phone and you call the test line. And they come down and check it out. Don't try not to do it. There's the law of diminishing returns. Like trying to go to speed of light. It takes a lot of energy to do. Please don't try and replace human beings as testers. There are organizations that seem to have this model. We're going to automate everything. Test automation tools are king. If we could get rid of every single tester, we would. This is just foolish. The testers are where brains are. Testers are where the knowledge and wisdom and intelligence are. The machines just do what they're told. They do it quickly. I'm a big fan of using test-driven development. The idea of creating a test, even before a piece of code is written, even before a module is written. Create a test and run it. It should fail. Why should it fail? Because the code doesn't exist yet. To implement the function you're trying to test. If that test passes, you know you've got a bad test. It'll pass anyway. Then write the code. Then run the test. And then refactor the code, make it better. Add some more tests, add some more functions to go around in this cycle until you finally consume all the requirements and you have a module that's finished. I'm a believer in test-driven development, encouraged to use. I'm also, this is down at the module level, down at the class and object level, in object-oriented. I suggest also that you use acceptance test-driven development. And this is about the system test work. Okay. The AT cycle is, first of all, discuss. What is the user story? What are the requirements? What do they really mean? Distill that down into a set of test cases. Develop those test cases in whatever language or scripting language you choose to. Execute them against the system under test and then do a demonstration. Did it pass or did it fail? Then discuss the findings. If it passed and everyone's happy, then add more functionality and test more functionality. Do this kind of a cycle both at the unit level, the module level, and at the system level. Write executable test cases. That's what these HTTP tests are. They're executable test cases. They're in some scripting language, not in some text document, which you then later have to convert into script. Do use exploratory testing. I'm a big fan of exploratory testing, and I haven't always been. Let me tell you that quick story. James Bach defines exploratory testing as the simultaneous learning and test design and test execution. We don't do test design at one time and place by one group. We don't then do test case creation later. We don't do test execution later, perhaps even with some other group. We do this simultaneously as we possibly can. It's a loop. We learn, we design tests, we execute them, we learn some more, and so on. I want to tell you how I kind of first became a believer. I've been in this business for a long time. And I can pretty well recite 829 word for word. I'm the classic waterfall guy, at least through my training. I invited James to come and talk about this new thing he called exploratory testing at one of the STAR conferences many years ago. And I gave him a 2-hour session, which I hardly ever do. And he set up a table right in front of the room, a bunch of computers, and gave about a 10-minute definition of exploratory testing, and then asked people to come from the audience and sit at the computers and give it a try. See if they can test naked, essentially. No test plans, no test cases, no, just go test. And I want to tell you how I kind of first became a believer. I have been in this business for a long time. And I've been in this business for a long time. And I can pretty well recite 829 word for word. He had people with shoulder-held cameras and peering over, so and big screens so that the entire audience could watch what was going on. I was sitting on the back row next to the door, knowing that this was going to be a waste of my time. I literally had the conference program and was checking through to see what else I could go to that would be far better than this. Just for a little reward, James brought a ship's bell. It was about this tall, big brass bell, and put it on the table in front and rang it and said, if you find a defect, you get to come and ring the bell. That's your reward as a tester. I'm sitting on the back row, trying to figure out how do I sneak out of here without being noticed. And after all, I'm the program chair, and people know who I am, and I want to leave as quietly as possible. I just started to get up, and the bell rang. And I looked, and sure enough, right on the big screen, somebody found a defect. And I went, oh, what was that? So I kind of sat back down and decided I'd stay 5 more minutes and watch this fail. Then I would hear. By the end of the session, which I stayed for in its entirety, people were queued up, waiting their turn to ring the bell. And I remember, this was a dozen years ago, but I remember that moment so precisely. Exploratory testing became real to me. And it should be real to you. It should be a tool in your toolbox. We'll talk about that in just a second. One of the complaints about exploratory testing is, well, how do we know when we're finished that we've done a good job? Can we say anything about coverage? Can we say anything about detection rates? Can we say anything at all to make our management feel good that we have used our time wisely? And James's brother John has come up with something called session-based exploratory testing, which answers those problems. You start doing exploratory testing, not just freestyle, not just, hey, let's try something, but with a charter. We're going to explore this, we're going to look for that. Exploratory testing has a time box. We limit ourselves, and we spend 60 minutes on this. We spend 2 hours in this area. We write a reviewable result, and then we do a debriefing with someone else to explain to them what we did and what we found, so that we can get some personal feedback. So I'm a fan of exploratory testing, session-based exploratory testing. Wish we tools to do it. Let's talk about the last one, and that's focus. Remember that finding defects is important. But more important, we really should focus on defect prevention activities. As program chair for the conferences, I get a dozen or so presentation proposals every conference on test process improvement. How we made our testing process better. How we can now spend less money and catch more bugs. And while that's important, finding defects is important, being effective and efficient is important. I always call and ask those people, what have you done so that there will be fewer defects to find in the future? How have you improved your development process, or your requirements gathering process, or your planning process, so there will be fewer problems to find in the future? And almost universally they say, oh, I wouldn't want to do that. I'm rewarded on the number of defects I find. If I could find fewer defects, I'd be worth less, personally, and our testing organization. I'm being old and tired and just shaking my head and saying, you don't get it. Prevention is better than cure. We should always include some amount of time in our testing work focused on prevention. It'll make our life better. So those are kind of the do's and don'ts. Like I said, I hope I've offended and stepped on the toes of at least a few of you in the technical classes. Again, I want to thank you for attending the conference. My appreciation to those who wanted to always still come. Sorry about the little hardware thing at the beginning, but I guess we managed to get over that. Shameless commercial message here if you're interested. I'm going to work on software test design. We should do that. Maybe you'll wait just a second. You're going to kind of prove to the wife and kids that I was here. So everybody smile. All right, gotcha. Thank you much. Have a good time.